Alright, so we're back, of course, to talk about some Final Fantasy VII, and we are once again talking about Crisis Core Reunion. We have a recent interview with Tetsuya Nomura. He did an interview with an Italian website just the other day. Yesterday specifically, but the website does say the 7th on it, but that's because it's been edited. There's articles that have translated its website yesterday, so I'm assuming that's when it happened. Now, majority of this interview is going to be stuff that we've already heard, stuff that came out around the time that Crisis Core Reunion was revealed, and the other interviews that came out like a week or two later for Rebirth and also Reunion. So the majority of it's not necessarily new, but there are at least two particular quotes and answers from Nomura that are definitely worth talking about. One of them that kind of is making the rounds a bit that the websites are actually like translating and talking about is where he goes in a little more in depth on whether or not the game is actually a remake or a remaster, and how even internally the devs were not sure. So the website asked Nomura whether or not it's a remake or remaster, to which he replies, "We have mixed feelings on it as we weren't sure about the best way to describe the project. At one point there was also a discussion about calling it a remake or a remaster. I think the product is more close to the definition of a remaster, as the story wasn't changed at all and it's always the same game. On the technical side, however, the graphics have been completely renewed, the models have been remade from scratch, many scenes that in the original game were only subtitled are now dubbed, and also the combat system has been updated. We're still uncertain on the term that best describes the game, which is the reason why we used Reunion. It's really complicated as it's much more than a remaster, but at the same time is not a complete remake." So there's actually quite a bit to unpack here. For one, we're getting further reasons for why they gave it the subname Reunion. It wasn't just to connect it to a remake in like the remake, rebirth sense, the RE subword. It's actually because they couldn't decide whether it was a remaster or a remake, so they gave it the word Reunion. But also like that we get it from Nomura that even internally the devs were not sure what to call it, because it is kind of a weird thing. It's definitely a remaster, like that's 100% what it is. But it's a remake in the sense that it's technically from the ground up, they remade like all the assets to the game. So it is also a remake. It's kind of both of them. But they also went into the game and like changed the combat around, right? And made it to where there's like shortcuts and the DMW is a little bit different and stuff like that. So they didn't even just graphically overhaul the game. They even made the game perform better at a technical level. So in that sense, it is also a remake. But the thing is, if they were to release this, port or whatever you want to call it of Crisis Core, and it was called Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Remake, that would set a bit of a precedent because people would be comparing it to Remake. Because Remake is an actual remake of FF7, but they added a fuck ton of new stuff. People would be expecting that, and that's not what this game is, because it is, at the end of the day, just a remaster. But also with this answer, Nomura kind of doubles down within the exact same sentence that there's not anything new when it comes to this game, because he specifically says the story wasn't changed at all, and it's always the same game, which is pretty interesting because there's a lot of people that think there's going to be new stuff. And I'm somebody that's there, like I somewhat think that as well, but I'm not 100% on it. And when you're seeing all the devs in these interviews say that there's nothing new, it's the same game, the same story, we're not adding anything new to it, it's hard to keep talking about there being new stuff when the devs keep saying that. Now they could potentially be lying, just trying to throw us off this trail, throw us off the scent, so that whenever we play Crisis Core Reunion and there is new stuff, we're just like dumbfounded and surprised. But we're already kind of expecting it anyways, so I don't know why they would keep doubling down on that. And it's not that I think the devs are lying in these interviews, it's just that, me and a lot of the other community, we feel like there's going to be something new. Because it is weird. Like, Crisis Core is a pretty old game, right? Like, 15 years old at this point. And they're all of a sudden, after making Remake and before Rebirth is going to come out, they're like, I guess we'll finally re-release this game. It's weird timing. It's strange timing. Especially when, according to them, there's never been any sort of, like, hold-up. There's never been this, like, GACT issue. There's never been, like, copyright issues or whatever the case. There's never been a reason they couldn't re-release Crisis Core. They just kind of haven't for 15 years, despite the fan demand being very, very high. And the fact that they want to drop this particular remake/remaster of Crisis Core between Remake and between Rebirth, it has the community buzzing. It has people talking about it. Even if it's just like a post-credit scene that gives us a further update on Zack, maybe something that takes place after the Sector 5 church shit that was seen at the end of the episode intermission, who knows exactly, something along those lines, right? I don't know. Or maybe something that takes place after the Rebirth trailer scene that we got, so maybe like something along the lines of like Zack and Cloud within Midgar, maybe we see where Zack took Cloud before the episode intermission, Sector 5 church stuff, like who knows, something along those lines, right? That's kind of what the community's hoping for, some sort of follow-up to the Zack shit. And it's like sort of the devs' fault because there's a lot of unanswered questions, and that's kind of what people want, right? There's so many questions surrounding Zack and Ending of Remake. We have theories and stuff we talked about 1,000 goddamn times. We're not going to talk about it here. But there's just so much unanswered questions. People are wondering what's going on with Zack. So that's why the expectations are there for this almost random like remaster coming out for Crisis Core all these years later between the first and second game for Remake. That's why people are expecting and thinking something's going to happen, even if it ends up not happening. And truth be told, there's never been really a reason for us to expect new stuff with this game from the dev perspective. They've never hinted at that or anything at all. It's really just kind of the community. Because I remember the day that the 25th anniversary live stream happened, like right after the live stream or maybe even during it, there's content creators out there, I'm not going to name many names, They're the ones saying this shit on social media. They're like, as soon as they seen the trailer for Crisis Core Reunion, they're like, it's gonna have a new ending that connects it to Remake, and the community kind of ran with that because they were saying that. It's kind of why it's not so good sometimes whenever like content creators voice their thoughts and opinion, because people run with it as canon, even if it's not gonna be. This question and answer right here isn't the other one that I wanted to talk about, but I do want to read it as well because it's more further adding on to there not being new shit to this game. So the website asks, have you even considered the idea of involving new characters in the story of Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion? I refer in particular to Roche and Sonon. Nomura replies with, if we had intended to turn out a total remake of the product, we probably would have considered changing the landscape design, introducing new characters to the story, and so on. We decided not to do this because intervening on the story of Crisis Core would have altered the entire continuity, potentially interfering with what we are trying to achieve with the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy. We have not changed anything because it was necessary that everything remain as it was. And the reason why I'm putting so much emphasis on this with this particular video is because there's content creators out there and theory crafters out there that believe that the ending's going to be different. Instead of Zack's final stand being Zack's death, he'll survive this time, kind of like what he did at the end of Remake. Whereas myself, and I know Maximilian Dude has said this, and other people out there have said it, that we think that the ending's going to be the same. Like, Zack still has to die. That's what you need to happen so that the Remake ending makes a lot of sense. You need to know that there was a fucking difference there. Because a lot of people out there think that the ending needs to be changed so that it makes sense for the Remake story, to connect it to the Remake story. But it doesn't have to be, right? Because in the history of Remake, the Cloud that we play as in Remake, his history is still the same as the original FF7, right? In his timeline, in that Cloud's locked away memories, Zack still fucking died. That still happened. Crisis Core is still canon to that Cloud, so you don't have to change a goddamn thing. But if they want to add new stuff, they can, of course, do a post-credit scene. Similar to the episode intermission. Nobody thought the episode intermission was going to give us any sort of follow-up to Remake with our party of characters or Zack, but we got both. So they could still do that with Crisis Core Reunion. They don't have to change anything about the actual game or story itself. It can be 100% the same Crisis Core that you played 15 motherfucking years ago, but they can add new stuff with, like, the ending scene or something. Sorry, I'm a little bit passionate about this, but I hate how often like people out there that talk about theories and shit and talk about remakes speaking like absolutes. Like, this is 100% what is happening, because I hate to break it to you, I don't care how accurate you think some of these theories are out there, nobody's going to get it 100% right. So this is the other question I want to look at where they talk about the Buster Sword. So the website asks, the Buster Sword, which was redesigned in 2007, now sports its original design. Is it a choice aimed at ensuring greater continuity with Final Fantasy VII Remake? Nomura replies with, that's right, we changed the design of the Buster Sword to return to its original look, which is also that of the remake. In the original version of Crisis Core, it was slightly different because the game was developed shortly after Advent Children, where a slightly modified Buster Sword appeared. While the first edition of Crisis Core was aligned with the look sported in the feature film, with Reunion we decided to align with the version proposed by Final Fantasy VII Remake. So it is the same sword. Of course, the Buster Sword's different appearances confused audiences, leading players to suspect that Crisis Core's was a different timeline. It is not so. It is the same sword, the same story, the same world. So this actually answers a couple questions, because we've actually talked about the two different Buster Swords before, and maybe like the Gold Hill Buster Sword being a different timeline, and maybe the idea of multiple timelines has always been there for the FF7 compilation. It's not just something new for Remake, but this completely shoots that down. But this also shoots down the idea of maybe Crisis Core Reunion taking place in like Terrier World, so to speak. Like we talked about the possibility of walking around in Crisis Core Reunion. It's the same game, but maybe they put new assets into the world. And if we see like the Terrier stamp logo, that would tell us, oh shit, this is taking place in like the different new timeline or whatever that we created at the end of Remake. But that seems to shoot it down, because he says it's the same sword, same story, same world. As in the same world as Remakes, and since this game is a prequel, if there was even a stamp logo at all, it should be the Beagle logo, since the Terrier shit doesn't happen until post us destroying the Whispers. But I just like that answer though, because Nomura straight up is like saying that there's not really a reason why there's ever been two different Buster Sword designs. It was just kind of done like that for Advent Children and Crisis Core. It never had a purpose or necessarily a reason, which makes me wonder why they did it all. Like, what was the purpose for Advent Children and Crisis Core for them to redesign the Buster Sword and give it the gold hilt? You could have said that that's how A and Jill had it. Maybe even Zack had it, but then, you know, maybe whenever Cloud got it in FF7, he redesigned it, took off the gold, or put like a casing around it or something to give the metal studs. But then you see the Gold Hill Buster Sword in Advent Children, which means that that's how technically Cloud should have had it during FF7, so it never made any goddamn sense. But then you also have the flashback in Advent Children that shows Cloud with the redesigned Buster Sword, the flashback that we also see at the end of Remake itself during the Chapter 18 shit. And then now they're saying that it never had a purpose. It was never there for a reason. And it's like, okay, then what was the goddamn point, Nomura? It's why certain aspects of like Remake and how the devs talk about it has always felt off to me, because like when you look at like Crisis Core's cutscenes and Advent Children, the movie, like they're of similar quality, right? And if they can completely redo the Buster Sword in Crisis Core Reunion, both in the game and also in the cutscenes, then why didn't they just edit the way the Buster Sword looked at the end of Remake? Like, it's either the devs are lying about certain aspects of Remake, as in maybe the two different swords do actually matter, or some aspects of Remake were just done lazily. And maybe it's both. But ultimately, dudes, I think that's going to be pretty much the video. And I don't know why, but for the last several months now, we've been putting out long videos. And I know I bring this up often on the channel, but we used to be a channel that was consistently putting out like news and info for FF7 Remake, and we could do the videos in like 4 to 7 minutes roughly. And it seems like now we do like anywhere from 8 to like 10 plus minute videos. And I used to pride myself on being a channel that could get the info out there to you guys a lot faster than other channels do. I'm not making these long ass videos, but for some reason that's changed recently. I don't know why, and hopefully you guys are enjoying the longer videos. But of course, pass off to you guys. When it comes to the two different Buster Sword designs, do you believe Nomura? Is he lying to our goddamn faces? Well, I guess to our eyeballs, because we're reading articles online. But is he lying to us? Do the two different sword designs matter? And if they don't, are they just fucking lazy when they made Remake and just didn't alter cutscenes like they should have? But also, the idea of anything being changed when it comes to Crisis Core. Do you believe Nomura? Is it like, again, they're doubling down. They keep reiterating this in every other interview that they do, whether it's Nomura, Katase, whoever, that nothing's changed when it comes to Crisis Core. So is that true? Either way, that's the video. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you guys aren't today. More Final Fantasy VII. God damn it, I fuck it up every time. Crisis Core, Final Fantasy VII Reunion content. Turn on notifications, follow me on Twitter, YT. I'm going to Discord, links are in the description and in the outro. That was a terrible one. Later, guys.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Logain, or leave it like Cobain.